Hi there, this is Dr. Amy Albright, and you are listening to Awakened Nation with Brad Zales.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Zales, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things to Awakened Nation. Hey, everybody. I am excited to have a consciousness raising show on today. You're going to love Dr. Amy Albright. Hi, Dr. Amy.
Hi there.
Welcome to Awakened Nation. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing fantastic this morning and so excited to drop into this conversation with you.
Where are you at right now, if I may ask?
Sure. I'm in the retreat home that we host in Northern California in the small town of Nevada City. So I'm nestled in the cedar and fir trees at the moment.
Nice. Beautiful setting. It's gorgeous up there. I love it. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to go right into Dr. Amy's bio. What if the key to extraordinary success wasn't just about strategy, but about rewiring your mind, body, and energy for radical transformation? Dr. Amy Albright is at the forefront of this revolution. As the founder of Holon, she has spent over 2 decades guiding high-level entrepreneurs, business leaders, and outliers to achieve peak performance. By integrating cutting-edge neurotechnology, real-time neurological change, and deep intuitive insight, she has helped companies scale from $10 million to $3 billion, achieving up to 300% top-line growth in just a few years. That's impressive, by the way. Her expertise spans cognitive psychology, energy healing, and even Chinese medicine, offering a unique fusion of science and spirituality that is redefining leadership and human potential. She's also a sought-after speaker in the psychedelic movement for conscious leadership. Dr. Amy, I am excited to have this conversation today. Welcome to Awakened Nation.
Thank you, Brad.
So let's dig in. How the heck did you get into this work? I mean,
Yeah.
this has got to be 20 years of your own personal development, learning all the methodologies, modalities, everything, getting your degrees. How did it all begin? Let's start there.
Yeah, sure. It actually started more than 20. It was 30 plus years ago. I had my first spiritual awakening at the age of 18. At that time, I was actually a devout atheist, let's say, totally shut down from anything other than logic and rational mind. And I was studying neurosciences. I was trying to understand really how consciousness worked by understanding neurochemistry. And so that's what I was studying in my undergraduate. And then when I had this really profound, I call it Big Bang awakening happen in my life, totally unplanned. And I knew that there was a God that would never be able to explain that science wasn't God, that there was something beyond science, that science would not be able to explain my experience. And I started at that point to devote myself fully to the exploration of consciousness, which was the through line. But it was done in such a way of a much more of a spiritual path, but still woven together with science. So I was still in preparation to become a researching scientific professor of cognitive psychology. I kind of shifted it about brain and behavior instead of dissecting rats. But I also explored out into anthropology and the studies of the ancient healing traditions and rites of passage and the sacred as taught to us and as we can remember through our ancestors of Native America.
That's powerful. I have participated in Native American ceremonies and plant healing as well. And I'm just mesmerized by this as you're talking about it. Some people have a spiritual experience. And for those of you listening, that might be, a loved one saved through prayer. That might be a car stops suddenly and you suddenly aren't killed on the highway. It can come in any form, way, shape, or form. And there are two kinds of people in this world. There are the people who go, "Oh, wow, I can't believe that happened," and they move on. And then there are people like, "There is a God. I've just been protected. What is this?
Mm.
And they go deeper and they want to know more. And you're that person. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people who maybe it's via plant medicine in the more recent years or, whatever it is that helped them to open up in maybe the last 5 or so years. There's been a great awakening. COVID was a great awakening tool for many people because they realized how much pain that they were actually in and because it all was brought to the surface. But I would say that it was not cool to be on this path 32 years ago. I'm
Oh,
almost
yeah.
50 now. It was not cool. There weren't books on it that much. I mean, there were some. There wasn't the internet yet. There wasn't a sense of community necessarily. So for me, it really required for me to devote myself to a path that had a very not only an unseen road, which I think is kind of the nature of any spiritual path, is like you're stepping out and maybe all you have is that next stepping stone along the way. But not only that, I had to be willing to be the super weird one. My acupuncture colleagues were not necessarily off into this trajectory. And and what was coming through me from those very early years was something beyond comprehension. And so I'm grateful I did have a mentor in that time that was actually my grandfather. So my biological grandfather had been studying transcendental meditation with the Maharishi since the 1950s, was friends with the Maharishi, devout practicer of TM, and also a devout student of consciousness. And so he started
Yeah.
training me at the age of 18, which is such a gift.
That is, that really is. You and I have had similar paths. My father was a chiropractor, so right away I wasn't fitting into the community.
Yeah.
And my best friend's father was a general practitioner and a surgeon in our hometown. So I already was, the odd person out. And like you, I started to question things. And my friends would pop pills to feel better. And my dad would like, you need an enema or something. I mean, it's like, it was like, no, so, I remember my dad adjusted me one time. I hated, there were two beds in his office and one was, he worked on your back. And then was the sideways one where they toggled your neck hard from the side. Now
Ooh.
he starts working on my back and he goes, I got to get you over here on the other table. I'm like, oh, I hate this one. I was so sick. Okay, Dad. And he goes, on one vertebrae, and the blood rushed from my head to my toes back up. I pushed my dad out of the way. I was like 12 at the time. I'd been sick for like a week. Pushed
Mm.
my big 6'2", 226 dad out of the way, ran into the kitchen and threw up and felt like I'd never been sick a day in my life. So when I hear
Wow.
people talking about chiropractic or acupuncture, I say you might want to try it. You may be so desperate at some point in your life, you will do it. And you'll
Right.
realize we've been lied to. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And I just want to say one more thing. When people start hearing that you're going into a more deeper spiritual, esoteric way of life, of going deep within, and there's some people who are like, all this is, negative or it's demonic, whatever, whatever they say. I just want to say, there are teachings in the Bible where they didn't tell you what Jesus did, but he went out into the desert, he went out into the wilderness to go deeper. His diet changed, everything changed. And this is what we're talking about. This almost obsession with learning who we are as soul here on earth, doing this work, learning to become better at what we're giving back to the world. That's how I look at it. So let's continue.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for the context on that because the spiritual path it has been demonized, I think, not because of what Jesus taught, because Jesus actually taught that we are all, just loving beings that are
Yeah.
capable of miracles, right? That was
Mhm.
his part of his work was to bring that message and to normalize us as
Yeah.
those conduits of consciousness of incredible feats, which I don't believe that that was his goal. And I am certainly not a theology expert, but I would say that what is unfortunate is that we have been taught to disconnect from, to demonize the true beauty of love and power,
Yeah.
because what we've been taught in the way that in our society as a whole, maybe through religion, through a lot of different formats,
Hmm.
is that we are separate, that we are flawed, and that we basically are undeserving. And inside of that, there is automatically going to be suffering, suffering of the
Yeah.
mind, the body, the spirit. And it's not really the model, I believe, if we look, in terms of how nature works, in terms of how the universe works, or even in terms of how the original teachings were taught before they became augmented through what got edited out of the Bible,
Yeah.
maybe, right? Or whatever. It's
Between
it's not.
Constantine and Justinian, those two emperors really ripped it apart. And then the King James Bible is really the first English version where they really shifted everything around. Most people recommend nowadays the Geneva Bible, or if you can get a
Mm.
hold of the Ethiopian Bible, you'll
Ooh.
find the original teachings there. Before King James got a hold of it. And a lot of people sit there and go, oh, King James is the best. No, he had a political agenda and he hired a bunch of people to rewrite it, and take out some of the codex. Because the original Bible's in Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, all these things. So sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. I always like to have context for
Yeah, I
listeners.
love it. I love
Good.
it. Yeah. So I love to understand the totality of all of it. I love to open the aperture, the focus beyond any particular religion. I've studied the teachings of Jesus. I've studied Buddhism, Taoism, and all of the indigenous traditions of the world that basically understood life and basically allowed for themselves to really deeply honor Earth and all of creation.
Right.
And
Hmm.
that's I feel like that if we open up the aperture, we find the deeper truth that all of them are saying, and then we understand each of those as individual teachings all the better,
Hmm.
because we are then washed clean of the frame of mind. So to go back to where we were a moment ago, talking about me being an atheist, I've never lost my passion for science. And I would say that one of the false gods that we pray to right now is science,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a lot of information that's available. There's so much incredible research and data that's available. And as somebody that has been a student of science and I mean hardcore, like neurosciences,
Yeah.
biological sciences, like all of that, what I can say is that one of the very first things that I learned in my studies as I prepared to be a researcher is that you can massage data. You can make
Oh,
data say anything you want to say
it's
within one
true.
study. And then the other thing is that those studies are all conducted by humans who are fundamentally imperfect beings who are doing
Right.
their best, maybe in so many ways. But actually, within academia, there's a huge amount of politics, and there's a huge amount that is silent.
Really?
Oh,
Really? I
yeah.
never noticed.
Oh, yeah. So that's why, what is real? Like in the world where AI is taking over in so many ways, and we don't even know if a photo is real or if somebody actually said something or, what's the truth? Just because AI spits it back out at us, Chat
Right.
GPT is not actually God either. Technology is not God. And what is real, we really have to build that bridge inside of ourselves. And that comes through deep foundational understandings and practices and really being devoted in a deep way to not being subject to what the masses are saying, but
Yeah.
instead to the truth that is truly within, that is true, that is there now and has always been there.
Yeah. I just want to put in a side note before we move on. When we talk about consciousness, ladies and gentlemen, consciousness is a particular type of awareness that is independent of the mind. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can study to be a neurosurgeon your whole life, but you can take a walk down the street and look up at the stars and feel the majesty of God. And all these things are going on, and your approach to life is part of consciousness, how you see things. And I love, Amy, when you were talking about being awakened, you had a shift in consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And someone I respect, they always say this, a shift in diet, when we change our diet, that's a shift in consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So consciousness is outside of the realm of what we're thinking and all the facts that we've absorbed and all the stuff that's inside this piece of meat here. Consciousness is the energy body of ourselves and our awareness of things.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to put that out. So when we talk about consciousness and you start to wake up and you start to look at the Bible and you start to look at Taoism, you start to look at the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna or any of these gurus throughout history, you start to see a thread that weaves all the tapestry together when it comes to consciousness. In science, I'm going to have Greg Braden on the show. He's probably the greatest scientist spiritualist I've ever met because he explains the science of spirituality. And that's what we're getting into here today. So if you're
Yeah.
just joining us, we have Dr. Amy Albright on. Excited to continue this conversation. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's
Um,
fine.
but when did you start to like get into the plant-based parts and the neurological studies and things like that?
I mean, my journey with plant medicine was very, very brief. And considering I've been on a 30 plus year journey, it has been a very small portion of it, I would
Hmm.
say. The neurosciences part, like I said, started in my undergraduate and it hasn't ever really left, but it dove down deeper when I met my colleague that is a co-founder of Whole On with me.
Hmm.
And about 14 years ago, we met through a very serendipitous encounter and ended up working together. So he works in neurofeedback therapy, amongst other therapies. He's also a doctor of Chinese medicine, like I am. So we have very holistic frames. We're also both cosmonauts, like wonders and explorers of all of this terrain that we're touching in on today,
Yeah.
since kind of from the start, it's just our essence. But what we started doing about 14 years ago is literally he would change the neural architecture, the literal hardwiring of the brain on an electrical level, because our brains function not just neurochemically, but also electrically and then with other forces as well. So he would change the electrical function of the brain to help people to become better leaders, to become better parents. And what we started to work with together is shifting the paradigm of leadership and working with the neurosciences that I had a background in and he's quite expert in,
Hmm.
to be able to reshape the reality. So, to be able to move people from a wider lens where maybe they see the world through fight or flight, victimhood, cause and effect in a very black and white and reductionistic model into a bigger frame, which includes more wisdom and more presence and a more evolved version of leadership. So people would come to him once a week and have their brain therapy done. And then they would come and see me, and I would provide executive coaching and strategic advising on every area, really, of their lives, but including scaling their businesses. And then when needed, I could absolutely address their physicality as well as the doctor of Chinese medicine. But my frame has always been big.
I find this incredible because I've always been doing the spiritual work. I realize, ever since I was young and I would walk into the backyard and talk to the stars, that was God to me. I'm talking to God and looking up and say, "Hey, God, Jesus, hey, can you help me out here?"
Mhm.
And then I've done everything from Landmark Forum to ayahuasca and peyote and all these things of going to retreats. And the ironic part, some of you who are listening are probably, rolling your eyes that executives do this, but I've always been astounded when I'm in an ayahuasca circle and there's CEOs from high level companies, I can't mention names,
Mhm.
or somebody who's at Landmark Forum. And the reason they do this kind of work is they want to become better leaders. They are
Mhm.
actually, like in the book The Corporate Mystic says, you'd be shocked at how many of these people have based their entire career on their spiritual foundation, their faith
Oh, yeah.
based foundation. And it's just, I want to proceed, but I want people to understand, if you're listening to this for the very first time and you're hearing it, you're probably wondering, well, how many executives do this? A lot of them. I
A
just want to
lot.
let you know
A
that.
lot of
So,
them. And they feel like they have to be in secret because our society shames this still because we're not necessarily feeling that we can hold our position in leadership and also allow our full self to be coming forward, allow our faith
yeah,
to be present. It's kind of it could break HR rules. It could make
yeah,
people feel ostracized or at risk. And ultimately, most people, I think, in this path are really wanting to be able to hold sacred and not have their most tender and important aspects of their life be, kind of like drugged through media or criticized by their
Yeah.
team or whatever.
Yeah, because it can feel like, granola eating, Birkenstock
Yeah,
wearing,
totally.
we're hippies in the
Totally.
modern era. And I put this in my first book, Liquid Leadership. I actually said that, not to
Yep.
insult anybody who wears Birkenstocks, eats granola, or is a former hippie.
Right.
A lot of my friends are. But I think to run a multi-million-dollar organization, multi-level, which I've done, you want to seek out stuff that turns the stress button down and
Hmm.
raises consciousness so I can see where the holes are in the organization or where people need help or where we
Yeah.
need to develop more. And I'm a very visual 3D person. I can visualize stuff three-dimensionally in my brain. It's one of those things that when I read how Tesla used to work, Nikolai Tesla, I went, that's how I work. That's how
Hmm.
I don't make a whole bunch of design comps and all these other things. I just do five or six because I've done 30 in my mind. Not everybody works that way. I didn't know that. But to do this kind of work, to be better, to serve humanity, I think is the driving force behind it. These people want to serve the people they work with every day, the people they hire, even the clients that they work with. Do you find that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what's starting to happen more and more is that these leaders, and some of them are running billions of dollars company or are actually billionaires, and they're realizing that they have missed the ultimate of strategy. And so here's where I want to say, like, when you were working with the consciousness definition earlier, it's 100% accurate, and there's so many layers and facets to it. But what I hear you describing when you're describing your leadership is your ability not just to look at the P&L. Like, if we're looking at the health of an organization based on the balance sheet and the P&L, and then whatever, hitting our SMART goals, or like whatever the frame is for that particular organization, that's only a part of it, because we can't
Right.
actually sense the trends in the market. We can't sense where the sinkholes are in the power and the efficiency in our teams unless we're using our intuitive and God-given capacities that are innate inside of us to sense and know beyond the mind, because that's that intuitive factor.
Hmm.
Historically, how we got here is because our ancestors were able to sense, where is a snake that might bite us, where's the
Yeah.
food, where's the herd moved to. How did they get that information? They sat and listened. They
Hmm.
felt. They did not think. It is not a thinking game, the survival in that way. And so now we've tried to reduce it to that at the level of the mind. But what I can tell you is that the most successful people in business, because I've worked with so many of them in this last 15 years, are also innately intuitive. And nobody makes a big decision in business without their gut, without their intuition, even if they don't believe that they have intuition.
You're right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's deep. I mean, how do you help people awaken that intuition in them? I mean, with clients, I'm sure you get a few people that aren't quite they're more left brain, but you're pulling
Mhm.
them more into the right brain. And by the way, the right brain cannot activate unless your heart is filled with joy, creativity, all these other things. So right brain activation, that's it's got to be interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, some of how we do it is actually, I would say, more than even a left brain or right brain conversation, is bringing them into the one mind. Because and I think that structurally men have a corpus callosum that doesn't have as much connectivity, so they're not as easily found inside of the intuitive space. Women can multitask much better, and they can also pass information between the hemispheres with a lot of ease, because we have, as my colleague has coined it, a 4-lane superhighway, where
Yeah.
men have a bit of a rickety bridge. So men actually have to show up with more courage and more discipline. And I deeply honor men as I say this. I love working with men, because what they do is their they bring their humility and they bring their power to this place of saying, I know that I want to know something more. I know there's more. And
Yeah.
um, and inside of that quest for more is this realization that things cannot be termed inside of black and white. There is not good and bad and right and wrong. There are the gamma frequency is a frequency of consciousness and bliss and joy as it is easily passed through the body. It actually comes as an effect of laying down a proper foundation. So we lay down proper foundation inside of folks, not for the sole purpose of the gamma waves, which we train directly, but also because we know that the proper foundation will bring people to where they want to be. So the proper foundation is anything from clearing out traumas and inaccurate belief structures. Most of what people think about themselves are actually inaccurate belief structures.
Mm.
Well, I'm this gender and I have this title and I do this in the world and that's what I am and I do like this and I don't like that. And it's like the further along we get in the path, the less that all that matters. And the more that then we're able to serve because we're using a lot of our neural capacity in the default mode, which is a communication structure in the brain, in our prefrontal cortex, which is like that overthinky part of the brain that can
Yeah.
really get going and push us with drive towards things we don't actually care about, which is really a whole topic in and of itself.
Yeah.
And we basically teach the brain directly through the work that we're doing and through the guidance that is provided to downregulate those structures so that we can upregulate the intuition, so that we can upregulate this, like, let's say quantum intelligence. I don't know if that's the right word. It's an intelligence that goes beyond the level of the mind, that has to do with the consciousness, and it transcends. It's like if the mind is a tool, let's not get lost in the hammer. If science is a screwdriver, basically to be help us to be able to like open the things that we don't yet understand, let's not get lost in the toolbox, but rather in the beautiful edifice that exists or that we're helping to construct with our very lives. And I think a lot of people are feeling a sense of drive and a sense of mission, but they don't necessarily know how to apply it because what they're wanting to be able to affect or do is actually in the space of this calling, of this no mind, of this knowing. And it's not letting go of the known world either. It's actually including more to it, right? So it's not an if then choice, like, oh, if I let go, then I'll be the woo person eating granola and I'm wearing my Birkenstocks and I'm screwed, which is, I think, one of the biggest fears that I help to dismantle is like, no, this is actually the path to greater freedom and greater worldly
Yeah.
success.
I think it was Carl Rogers who started this movement that said that the reason that people make bad choices in their lives is low self-esteem. And so
Hmm.
this movement started coming across America where we were going to give trophies for everybody who shows up. We're going to tell people, you're you're the best, honey. You're the best, even though they
Hmm.
were 11th on their swim team, things like
Right.
this. And I've always said to people, you can't tell a child self-esteem. You can't
Right.
tell it. They have to earn it through something they do with their peers, something that helps them step into this light of knowing what their greatness is or what they're really good at. Let's just start with that. What are you really good with doing? Or being? Maybe you love to paint and draw. And
Yeah.
and I just find it interesting how you're getting back to the neuroscience of all of this, and it's very exciting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's the neuroscience and it's the soul self level because
yeah.
ultimately we can still be taught, well, if you're not smart in school, at least you're good at sports or art. Well, the thing is like we're still kind of basically working with a fundamental premise that is flawed, which is that we have to
Yeah.
earn our birthright of belonging and deserving.
Yeah.
Like that is not actually the way, like a squirrel doesn't run around. My dog is not wondering if she deserves. Like she's just like, scratch my belly and I'm here to protect you. And she's not going to overthink it. And she has far more freedom than a lot of people, maybe
Yeah.
in
Well,
that regard. But I would say that, we might confuse self-esteem as something we either have or don't have, but it's the thing that is underneath that's the more important thing is the sense of belonging to the all that is and that we are automatically included and involved. And then we're just shifting our mind and our patterns of behavior, our patterns of mind and behavior to be able to feel that inclusion, right? And there are quick bridges and ways to get there, honestly. And that's a lot of what we teach and promote and help with Hold On is how do we
yeah.
get there? Because it's not enough to know it at the level of the mind. The
Yeah.
mind can't actually soothe this feeling of belonging or not belonging.
I love that you're saying this, because I do believe that's the flaw in Carl Roger's work. Um, it is uh, the sense of connection to spirit, God, and people and other souls, I think is the most important part of the work. I do want to get back to something just so that my audience can know this.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you saw this guy. I think his name's Pastor Jeff, but he talks about the difference between men and women's brains. And he has
Mhm.
a bust of a man's head, like they do in science class, and the parameters are all, laid out. And then he has a woman's brain on the other side. And they're both on pedestals. And this is the best part. And for those of you who want to know why men are from Mars and women are from Venus, uh, I always say this: women have something down the center of their brain that allows both hemispheres to connect. Okay. And this is why it appears to men why women don't make decisions quickly. The reason is, ladies and gentlemen, women will have five choices, let's say, for one thing, but there are five subcategories for each and every one of these choices. Okay. That's how it works. Now, men do not have that same interconnection in their hemispheres.
Yeah.
We see three choices and only three choices.
With no sub choices necessarily, right?
Right, right.
And
So,
then, and yeah, go ahead.
and this is why men throughout history look like great decision makers, because we'll stand up and we'll go, "We got to take Italy," and that's it. No one's thinking. They go, "Hey, that guy's smart." But a
And
woman is thinking, well, what about if we come around this way through Spain, Portugal, and Spain, and we do this and we create a campaign? They're thinking at a higher level.
right.
And so when men are evolved enough, brain wise, and all this, they start to make different choices than the average man. Okay. And I love this guy dearly. Tim Davis was my comedy coach when I did stand up comedy years ago. He said, he talked about this, the difference between men and women's brains. And he said, men have to go past the three choices into the fifth choice, the sixth choice.
Yeah.
And because he hated, and I'm sorry to say this, he hated dick and fart jokes, which is what a lot of guys go to right away. They go to right away. It's their, funny, yes, but Robin Williams was a good example of a man who went to the fifth choices,
Yeah.
who went beyond the standard. He went to higher consciousness when he would do his comedy, when he would speak. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. When men step into this, it doesn't feel natural at first, but it becomes natural. Someone like me, I've always thrived on intuition. I've made my whole career based on intuition, but I have a lot of my friends who I'm very close with who think I'm a weirdo
Yeah.
because of it, because they've made pure rational choices. And let's talk about that a little bit, because now we're getting into the realm of you've worked to raise consciousness. Now you're going into intuition.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, like I said, intuition it's a highly strategic skill set, right? Because our intuition is the thing that puts that next step in our path.
Mm,
Intuition is what allows for us to have direct guidance from whether we want to call it our highest self, from God, from whatever the wording is that suits us. It's an intuitive capacity. It's an opening of the antenna of the body and of the mind, softening of the mind in so many
mm,
ways. And an attunement that allows for this information to flow through. And it doesn't have to feel scary or foreign. And we're doing it all of the time, whether we kind of know it or not. One of my
mm-hmm.
favorite cognitive psychology studies that's been out for a really long time is that they can put somebody in front of a projection screen and show them images, and that they will begin to respond to the next image before the image is shown because they're
Wow.
measuring the brain in milliseconds, right? So if we know if this next image is a smiling baby or the barrel of a gun pointed directly at our head, and our brain is responding before the image is shown with no prompting in a very clean study, by the way, a well-designed study,
Yeah.
then what does that mean about our bodies in general? What does that mean about reality? What does that mean about our capacity to predict? But I think what has happened is that we've decided to put all that to the side. it takes a little more development. To your point about not rushing to make a decision, it takes a little bit more development. It takes courage. It takes the pause. It takes going maybe against this fear-based impulse drive to just act, go, do, be, run the hamster wheel, go, 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 you know? If you slow it down a notch, that's when you
Yeah.
leave a little space for your gut to be in there and
Wow.
for the intuition to be able to then relay to the conscious mind. Because basically, even though people are having that knowing, they may not allow themselves to know it cognitively because they're on to the next thing and they're not paying attention. So
Yeah.
their neurology is responding, but their mind may never pay attention unless they decide with the level of the mind that it's worth paying attention to.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the brain science studies, and I think the one that you mentioned, this was part of it. They found that the brain is operating 6 seconds into the future. That's why baseball players are able to hit. They're swinging as the ball's released. How
Yeah.
do you aim as something's coming at you at 98 miles an hour? But the other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I forget the doctor who discovered this, but like your brain is firing in the conscious brain something like 2,000 neurons per second, but your subconscious part of your brain is like 2 billion per second. And don't
Oh,
quote me on that, but it's like,
yeah.
and so who's really running the show, and where do you really think you should now start to connect, the conscious
Yeah.
or the subconscious? So
Yeah.
I love this. Let's move on. I love this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I would like to just add to that. Inside of neurofeedback therapy, let me just take a moment to describe what the heck that actually is, because we've talked a little bit about it or around it, because I think it links really beautifully to what it is you're describing. So the conscious mind is much slower, just like you said. With neurofeedback therapy, we essentially put sensors directly onto the scalp that sense what's going on an electrical level in the brain. The brain information is then sent to a computer, which understands and computes what it is that's happening and then feeds it
Mm,
back directly to the brain. The mind is not a part of this feedback loop per se, much at all. So
wow.
it's literally operant conditioning that tells the brain exactly how it's doing, as though it could look at itself in the mirror, and know how to perform better, right? If a dancer never looked in a mirror, would they be the top of their game? Probably not, right? Like they
Right.
kind of need that feedback. So neurologically, our neurons are responding to sights and or sounds that we're hearing, and it's then responding and finding a more correct neural pathway. So, how
Hmm.
does the brain use its electrical current with the current wiring that it has in that moment most optimally? And the brain is learning that. And the learning process takes about 40 milliseconds. So, that's a very small fraction of a second,
Right.
right? So, the mind is interpreting that information at roughly 400 milliseconds. So the
Wow.
mind is like, oh, maybe, and I've had people there, we've got people they'll come through, we've got them hooked up to all this high-tech equipment. We've told them to chill out. Do you know how bad it is for a type A person to be like, your job
I,
is to chill out. Your job is to pretend you're five and try not to have any jobs. And people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. They panic, right? So, and then what they'll start doing is things like this. Well, if I breathe through my chakras, if I think of my cat, maybe I can make the machine make the sound. If I blah blah. And when they finally relax, that's when their brain can function at a whole different level. When they get out of the way with trying to control, trying to perceive, trying to gamify, and let the brain work with the brain, then the brain actually moves into these more exalted or optimized or whatever, peak performance states.
right.
So it's a huge lesson because almost everybody that comes through, I mean, who we work with are highly successful peak performers, leaders and visionaries from around the world.
Yeah.
And usually they come in and there's a little bit of a struggle fest the first day in our program where they learn to let go of the reins. You can't push on the steering wheel to make the car go faster, is what my colleague always tells them.
I love that.
But it's such a deep teaching, and you really
Yeah.
begin to learn it when you get that feedback in real time. Like, how much over efforting am I doing that's essentially blocking this divine or innate embodied intelligence neurologically?
That's incredibly powerful. And I was going to ask, how do people work with you? And this is step one, obviously. Learn to let go.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
where do we get a hold of you, by the way? What website should we go to?
It's holonexperience.com. It's HOLON experience.com. And holon
Excellent.
is a word that speaks to the interconnectedness, like the word holograph. So
Right.
it is at the core of what we teach. And the word experience is in there because, as we've been talking about in this conversation, it doesn't really matter if we have the thought construct of being connected to the all that is. We actually need to get it in our bodies,
Right.
because that's the only place it matters. So if people want to go there, I actually have a free download of it's a very gentle breathwork practice. It's maybe the gentlest and sweetest that I know. It's and very easy to follow, and it creates an immediate shift into feeling in an embodied way the experience of the interconnectedness and being able to get out of the mind without thinking, I got to get out of my mind. I got to, um, and I think that a lot of people struggle and suffer with meditation, and this kind of
I
bypasses that.
have to relax. I
I
have
must,
to
I must
relax. I
wait. I'm
must
not
relax.
relaxing.
Now let's back up a second. You just said breath work.
Yeah,
Okay. A
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people may not know this, what breath work is. I can tell you this. My buddy Mike Purvis, when I was in the middle of my divorce in 2018, he had an apartment, a room for rent, and I took it right away because he was also going through a divorce. And we were, two divorcees living in a household. And the Friday or Thursday I arrived, he goes, "Hey, I signed us up for breath work and peyote. Is that okay? So we could bond." I'm like, what the hell? Because I lived in New York City for 35 years. Now I'm coming out to the Southwest in the desert. And it not only was bonding, but I want to talk about these release modalities and breath work. I was shocked. You're going to laugh, Amy. I was shocked how it worked. We're laying by the fire. We're on mats, and we're breathing and breathing and dealing with release of some of these things. Let's talk about breath work and the power that it has.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's all different sorts of breath work and all different lineages, and but I would say that the kind where we're doing a hard, like huffing and puffing kind of breathing, is we're walking our bodies and our emotional selves into this place of kind of a required release and surrender, and we're
Hmm.
releasing a massive amount of neurochemicals in our brain, and we are moving our energy of our bodies in a certain way that is incredible. And for myself, I've had massive, massive transformations and insights and discoveries and pain drop away. I've seen it for hundreds of other
Yeah.
people. I have heard many people say that their most powerful transformative experience in their entire lives, even those who have sat diligently with psychedelics, has actually been through breath work. And
Wow.
again, I think that this really speaks to the power of our own body, the power of our will. We don't need something outside of us to find, the heaven inside of us, right? That it's already all there, and that we have the keys to freedom, right? Because freedom isn't, it's not about success or financial freedom. I mean, those things are
Right.
very nice, but it's really freedom from fear and from suffering that is that deepest liberation. And
Yeah.
that can be found just even through breath work. It's
Wow.
incredible. Hmm.
I'll just put this out to some people. If you've been with your partner for, let's say, 20 years, make a note of if you're about to make love, are you holding your breath? If you're
Mm,
driving down the highway and you're holding your breath, or you're doing a certain thought, and you're holding your breath. Breath work helps you release that because some of these things are trauma based and some of them are just psychological. We're still wrapped in a loop from childhood, actually.
totally.
And this helps release it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful tool that a lot of people, didn't know existed. Let's put it this way. I like that you said, it's right at our fingertips. We don't need to go out and seek it. We can work with it right here, right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, hardcore huffing and puffing, that's a huge workout. You lay down on a mat and you kind of intentionally hyperventilate yourself to get there. And I love it, by the way, but it's not something that I can do every day. None of us can do that
Yeah.
necessarily every day or not for very many minutes. But the gentler breaths that are out there in either the yogic traditions or the one that I've offered on the website that I was mentioning can be there for you in every moment. And I love what you were talking about with that, is that we need to be, or we are, it would be optimized to be in touch with our breath, because our breath tells us where we are holding. And ultimately, whether it's the breath work, whether it's psychedelics, whether it's working in these highly
Hmm.
specialized fields of neurofeedback therapy, what we're wanting to be able to do, at least in part, is to be able to decouple the experience of trauma as like the emotional train wreck that it kind of has been in that moment and can perpetuate
Yeah.
out subconsciously as, right, and be able to decouple. There's a structure inside the brain called the hippocampus, and then the hippocampus, there's the way that proteins get bound together. We actually, if the hippocampus is about memory, we actually have a protein that's holding a memory, which is just a memory, to the trauma feeling. And as we move through certain of these practices and get into these states, what we're doing is unraveling a protein. So imagine
Wow.
a little knot getting unraveled. And when that happens, it can actually create a cascade, like a ring of dominoes going off, where
Yeah.
when we release one big trauma that's been running our lives, we actually can release a massive amount of fear and shame and hiding and emotionality. And in that, then our consciousness, our awareness becomes more profound. We have wisdom and insight that applies to things that we didn't even know. First off, we didn't even know that thing was driving us. Second off, we didn't realize all the places it was driving us. And third off, we have no idea what it's like to be free of that until we
Yeah.
are free of that.
It's kind of like, to me, you go through life and you're wearing, rose-colored glasses, and you don't know you're wearing rose-colored glasses after a while.
Yeah.
And you may not know that's interfering with success in business, life, marriage, sex,
Yeah.
joy. I know people who can't have a moment of joy. They feel guilty
Right.
of that. These are the rose-colored glasses that you don't know you put on back when you were a kid,
Yeah.
and they kind of need to come off. Thank you. This has been a fascinating conversation here
Yeah.
on Awakened Nation. I want to ask you something else. What do you find? Is there a consistent pattern that people lie to themselves about before they get to you? Is there anything that you can kind of hone in on concrete wise?
I would say it doesn't matter, and this is super important for people to know. It doesn't matter how perfectly their children turn out. It doesn't matter how much money they've made. It doesn't matter what kind of impact they've made out in the world. What I see again and again and again, regardless of situation in that regard, is that people struggle with the same basic things. Am I loved? Am I lovable? Am I worthy? Is there something wrong with me? And then I would say, kind of a blanket of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is not escaped regardless of levels of success. It's an inside job. Another one would be, do I belong? And then,
Mhm.
kind of fundamental to all of those is, am I safe? Because if on a subconscious level, how
Wow.
all of that gets wired is like, I could be destroyed. I could be kicked out of the tribe. I might die if I
Mm.
face these fears. And what's true is that instead of dying, well, there is a death in a way. There's a death of the illusion, there's a death of the suffering. So that's a good thing. But underneath all of that is actual birth into life, because most people are not actually all the way alive because they are so enslaved consciously and subconsciously to one or all of those fears.
Wow. That's powerful. I found for myself and for a lot of people, they're not operating in what they truly want in life. They're operating based on their parents wanted them to be a
That's
lawyer,
right.
or they're proud. They made their mom proud, or they made their family lineage proud, and they're
Hmm.
not actually doing what they want. I learned this through Julie Cameron's work, the Artist's Way,
Yeah.
where a lot of us may be shadows of ourselves. And for myself, when I learned to give up this thing that I had in me to make my father proud of me, to get his attention, is really what it
Yeah.
was, to prove him wrong, that
Mm.
artists are not going to starve to death, and redefined how I wanted to live my life. Guess what? My life took off. So,
That's
for those
right.
of you who are listening to this and you might be like, well, where do I get started? Just start. Just start.
Totally.
Reach out to Amy, Dr. Amy Albright. Fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being on Awakened Nation today. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you, Brad, for having me. It's been
You,
fun.
you bet. Reach out. to Dr. Amy. We're going to have everything in the show notes, but I can't let you go just yet. I have a lightning round of 3 questions.
Oh,
Are
right.
you
Okay.
ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
My first question is, what's your favorite memory?
Oh, I mean, there's so many that I could say, but what I would say is probably the moment of my son's birth, because I feel like I basically went from one understanding and level of knowing love to one that I felt like that might destroy me in a way, like that I
Mhm.
actually like burst open with so much love. And I don't know, not everybody has children of their own, but just to know that a mother's love, if they're in, or they're not mothers
Mhm.
per se, a mother's love, or I would say a parent's love, I only know what it is to be a mother, is such a deep reframe. And our children
Yeah,
mean so much to us, even if we don't know perfectly how to express it.
yeah. Wow. My second question is, in consciousness, in growth, in your spiritual journey, what was the greatest transformation for you personally?
Mm. Learning to trust myself, even above all of what society seems to make as rules. Learning to trust in my own goodness and my own capacity to find the way and play outside of the very rule book, the same way that we've been talking about here today.
Mm. And my third and final question is, what's your greatest hope for humanity right now?
My greatest hope is that we come back to a sense of belonging, a sense of this interconnectedness, that we can drop away the fear and the illusion and come together. We really belong to each other. We belong to this earth, and that we have a full and deep remembrance of that, because that's the path forward in the highest way. It's the path of remembrance. So yeah, for people
Wow.
to remember.
Yeah, Graham Hancock says it best. He says, "We are a race that suffers from amnesia."
Yeah. And we're looking at an extinction event if we don't get it right.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show today, Dr. Amy. Thank you for being on Awakened Nation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, tune in next week. We're going to have another extraordinary guest here on Awakened Nation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That helps us out immensely. And please leave a comment if you like the show. If you didn't like the show, either way, try to leave a comment. I appreciate it. Until next week, bye bye for now. Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share this episode out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success is because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.